Glenn Danuser, thank you so much for joining us today for another Machine Heads interview. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know you guys are super busy, but yeah, we'll jump right into this. We're going to be talking about equipping a CTL or a skid steer with an auger. You guys are long history, a long time manufacturer of attachments. Let's start with a quick overview of the auger itself as an attachment and its use specifically on skid steers and CTLs. To you guys, what jobs are, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but I don't know if this is the best question because a lot of times it just kind of depends on what you have on the site or whatever the tool is that you're typically using on a particular job site most often. But tool carrier capability is just kind of exploded within the compact segment. There's all kinds of machines that you can put an auger on these days, from the little mini stand-ons to a compact excavator to a CTL or skid. So what situations or what types of jobs are really best served by attaching an auger to a CTL or skid steer versus using another tool carrier like a compact excavator or mini skid steer, in your opinion?
So, I think it really boils down to is what kind of vehicle do you have in your fleet? What's your everyday go-to? That could be a CTL, skid steer, a telehandler, excavator, mini, any of those. And so we'll adapt to either one. So once we have an understanding of what vehicle is going to be used, then we'll do some research and try to find flows and pressure, because you have to have your gallons per minute and you have to have your pressure within the spectrum of what you want the auger to do. And so kind of starts back, with your right auger system is you have planetary gear driven augers, you have direct drive, and then you do still have a few chain drive options out there. Obviously, planetary, I believe, is the most popular. That's where we reside as well. It provides a powerhouse of a planetary gearbox to ensure a greater torque. So once we know what vehicle you want to use and the model of it, we can get those type of details, and now we can start putting together a recommendation package for you.
Okay, great. So yeah, like you said, I mean, it really kind of just depends on whatever your go-to is, because the tool carriers are so adaptable and these systems are so adaptable, and you can pretty much outfit any machine you want to kind of get the job done. Moving into considerations, and you touched on this a little bit, but when it comes to picking the right auger, the three kind of categories or biggest considerations typically are soil type, the machine, like we were just talking about, the machine you're going to be actually attaching it to, the size of that machine, its specifications and flow rates, and then the accessories as well. You've got auger bits, auger extensions. So kind of starting off, what do kind of customers, let's start with the soil consideration. What do customers need to do to ensure that they're getting the right auger for the type of soil that they're going to be drilling into?
Okay. So if you have difficult soil type or hard to dig through, then you would go for the option of more torque, less speed. When it comes to an auger, you can't have heavy torque and heavy speed. You have to sacrifice one over the other. So difficult ground will go with more torque. If your vehicle, let's say, produces 20 gallons a minute and you can get an auger drive that does 10 to 20 gallons, that 20 is on the high side. So that's going to provide more speed. So then you would probably step up maybe to a next model, might be a 15 to 30 gallon per minute. Keep the 20 at the lower side. So your flow being on the low end spectrum of what the auger can handle will produce more torque and less speed. So we would, of course, ask what's your soil conditions, diameter of your hole, depth of your hole, and go from there. So tough ground, we're going to put them in a heavier torque. If they want to go 10 foot, 12 foot, even deeper, now we have to really get into a bigger auger drive, because your foot-pounds of torque is going to be more important to you than your RPM of how you're going to spin it. Standard flow is typical of what every auger needs. Augers don't need high flow. If you're going to use high flow, that just means you're spinning the auger faster, and that would spin the dirt out of the hole quicker, I assume. That is something we really don't focus on. We like to stay a standard flow and try to match what do they want, more speed or more torque with their desired job that they're going to do and their task, and then we'll match it together correctly.
Is that going to change depending on the soil type? And you mentioned, because you're going to want to go slower or heavier torque in more situations, slower speed, heavier torque. That matching those soil conditions, is that going to, are there going to be like different you mentioned the three different systems that you guys offer. Is it good to, like, are there some customers out there that are going to need more than one system, or do you just kind of have to change the way that are they more adaptable to different soil conditions? How does that, like, should you buy multiple or can you buy one? And is there, you just basically change the way you use the attachment rather
Yeah.
than changing out the system itself?
I don't see any reason to buy two or three different auger systems. Buy
Okay.
one. If you live in Kansas and your digging is always black dirt, then you're going to need one that probably more speed and less torque. Now, if you're a contractor and you're floating all over the area, well, torque is king because speed doesn't really do much for you. It can get you in and out of a job quicker, but then next week you find yourself in rocky, heavy, compact soil. Well, now it's going to cost you more money because it's not going to have the torque to dig through. So I always opt to have torque. Torque's always better than speed. No matter what it throws at you, you still have the muscle to put a hole in the ground because, i.e., that's what you bought the auger for, is to get the hole in the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us through some specific soil conditions and kind of tell us what, either what auger or kind of like the way you should use the auger would be, and how to best match those conditions. You mentioned a couple of them, but like loose or sandy kind of soils, clay and compact soils, rocky or mixed. Kind of take us through the basic kind of soil conditions and how you should kind of like approach those, and whether it's, obviously for the tougher stuff, it's going to be, more torque and less speed. Is it that simple, or is there, deeper explanation to what you should be kind of considering when it comes to those specific conditions?
No, it is. It is kind of that simple. So, the different type of auger bits. You have a bolt-on to design, which is what we refer to in light duty. Good for dirt digging. Then you have a heavier duty, which kind of has a cast steel head to where the teeth are secured into the cast head. Now, that would be a heavy duty auger in our book, and that is great for compact soils, clay, rocky conditions, anything that is fracturable, that would be okay. If you hit it with a breaker bar and it sparks, that's not okay because it is not good for solid type applications. And then, of course, your most extreme auger would be your solid rock, solid concrete type auger, where that is a must to have slow speed and a lot of torque and a lot of downforce because it will take a while to penetrate something solid as rock or concrete. So that's kind of how we do it: is light duty bolt-on teeth, heavy duty drive-in with a cast steel head, extreme duty for a bullet type rock auger, needs more torque, less speed.
Okay. And then take us through your lineup, your auger solutions specifically that you guys can match to skid steers and compact track loaders. And then, specifically kind of like, let's go through like how you guys feel like, give us your sales pitch. How do you guys feel like your models stand out from or differentiate from the rest of the market? Or kind of like, what do you guys think is important whenever you're designing? You guys have been around and doing this for a really long time. So just kind of take us through your solutions and kind of like what sets you guys apart.
Okay. So we introduced our EP auger system back in 2010. We were looking for a hydraulic solution that would not break the bank, but allow customers to utilize an auger system on any type of vehicle in their lineup. And so the EP was born. We are the third auger manufacturer in the world to have their own planetary gearbox. We have our planetary is designed and engineered to our specifications, which means it has a check and a fill plug on the outside of the planetary, which is great. Some others are under the housing, and so to access or check your oil levels, one would have to remove the housing. Well, let's face it, who's really going to do that? So we make ours accessible on the outside. Our output shaft is 2-inch hex. Some offer 2 and 9/16 round. Ours are strictly hex. We do have adapters that can go from hex to round, round to hex to use any other type of auger bits in their arsenal. But we offer a lifetime shaft pullout that you will never be able to pull the shaft out of the planetary because it's all a one-piece construction that goes up into the part of the planet gears where all 3 planet gears are made into one piece, one assembly, which the output shaft is connected to. Some will use a bearing nut or a snap ring, but we manufactured ours into one piece. You would literally have to pull our casting of our planetary apart to get that shaft out. So with that being said, our planetary designed to our specs is 42% stronger, more torque than the average planetary supplier on the market. So that in a nutshell kind of breaks down what ours are a little different, how we designed ours. We have the hoses routed through the top that will allow you to get deeper into the hole, closer to other obstructions or buildings. Hoses through the top, planetary, 5-year warranty. Now, our auger drives range from anywhere from 6 to 35 gallons per minute. So we can adapt to majority of your tractors, skid steers, CDLs, mini excavators, and mini skid steers.
And there's four different kind of, I guess, models of the EP series, from the 615, the EP 1020, the EP 1530, and the EP 2035. Do those? It's kind of the same system, and is the main differences between those kind of like the flow requirements and then the diameter that of the auger that it supports? Kind of take us through those four. Is that pretty much sum it up?
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the motor is what changes your models. Our numbers, our EP15, for instance, it means it can do 6 to 15 gallons per minute. So that is a good option for a small tractor loader, a mini excavator, or a small mini skid steer. Then the step up would be the EP10, and it just uses a different series of motor to allow for more flow, and then you can now go 10 to 20 gallons per minute. The 615 is a 24-inch maximum auger, and the 1020 is a 30-inch maximum diameter auger. And then we step it up a little bit more to your more common 1530, 15 to 30 flow ranges, which can accommodate majority of skid steer, majority of CTLs, even some larger type mini excavators, and that one can still turn up to a 30-inch diameter auger. The EP 2035, we did take its traditional motor away and we put in a heavy-duty Parker motor. So you'll notice that the foot-pounds of torque from a 1530 really spiked to a 2035. And we wanted that one option that could really go up in foot-pounds of class torque-wise big time. So we got away from our traditional motor and put a heavy Parker motor on it. And now we could do the 20 to 35, and our foot-pounds of torque is over 4,000. So that's a pretty good jump for 36-inch diameter augers, or what the last two models can do, the 1530 and the 2035. But that, in a sense, is you're trying to cover all your flow ranges, but the EP 2035 does use a different type of motor.
Okay. And then when it comes to matching and figuring out which of these four models is best for you, I mean, it seems like it could just be as simple as matching your flow rate, and then matching, kind of also keeping in mind, well, maybe you had this machine in mind as your tool carrier, but you have some jobs where you're going to need the flow rate to actually kind of like do those jobs, or maybe you want the expandability. Take us through kind of some of the considerations, because it seems like you can either match the attachment to the machine, or you can pick the auger that's going to be most flexible for you to, like, maybe you want to flex into some larger jobs, or maybe you just want to stick with what you have, and kind of take us through the kind of the considerations between either matching the auger to the machine with these four models, or maybe thinking about like using a different machine than you had in mind.
Sure.
Those considerations.
Sure. So let's say your vehicle has 20 gallons per minute. So that would hit three different Danuser auger systems. That would hit the 1020, the 1530, and the 2035. So if you wanted something with some heavy torque, and not necessarily too tough digging, but let's say it's hard, it's compacted, it's got some rocks in the soil, we would probably put you into the EP 1530. You want to keep that flow amount, remember it's 20 gallons a minute. Lower on the scale of the auger system range means greater torque. When it's on the higher end of the scale, that means greater speed. So if we put a 1020 on a 20 gallon per minute vehicle, you're going to sacrifice torque, but you're going to gain a lot of speed. So that's not very good for tough digging. So then we step you to the 1530. Well, that 20 gallon is a little bit closer to the bottom, will give you more torque, less speed. But then if it's into something really difficult to where it is a fracturable rock that you hit it with a breaker bar, it will crack. You might want to go all the way to the 2035. You're on the very low end of the spectrum, which means your speed is going to decrease significantly, but your torque is going to be much higher than any of the three options. So a lot of times, if you're on that type of a flow range 20, I'll run it through our calculator of speed and torque and give you the options. Everybody likes the torque, but they say, yeah, but what's the speed on that 2035? Well, if it's at 40 something, RPM, that's pretty slow. If you can get it around 50, 55, I like to maintain almost like a turn a second. So keep it under the 60. It's just whatever the customer can live with. If they say, no, I want that EP 2035 to get as maximum torque as I can at 20 gallons, and I'm okay if it runs 48 revolutions a minute, then I like to just warn people ahead of time, as that would be your ultimate pick to go through very hard, fracturable type rock ground.
Yeah. No, like that aspect there of kind of like how what a huge factor the flow and kind of like the flow range on the attachment versus kind of like what you have on the machine. That could make this, depending on the customer, that could make this, like you said, you have a calculator, that could make this a pretty complex thing that you really kind of need to think about. So, like, yeah, this is something that whenever you approach it and you're about to make that investment, that you need to think, pretty heavily about. When it comes to the speed, I mean, obviously, like you said, kind of like torque is king because, the more torque that you have at your disposal, the more conditions you can kind of push through. Maybe you might be pushing through those conditions a little more slowly, but you can still do them. When it comes to speed, how should customers really kind of, I guess, contextualize that in terms of like it's second priority to torque, but obviously the faster that you can get a job done, the better. But how much faster are we talking as you kind of like go up through those RPMs? Like as you're increasing your RPMs, when does it kind of cancel out again because you're increasing those RPMs, but maybe you get to a certain part of this drilling where maybe the ground is a little tougher. Like how does that all even out, and how should they think about how much faster am I really going to be able to get a job done if I increase my RPMs, another 10% or whatever?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the $1 million question, right? Nobody really knows what's down in that ground a foot, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4 foot deep. I guess if you're drilling in California and it's nothing but loose material all day long, then yeah, your speed's going to be your better option. You'll be able to clean the hole out quicker, bring the dirt to the surface quicker. But is that 2 to 1? I don't know. That's hard saying because with the torque, you can still screw down, stop the auger in a hole, pull it out, and you have a clean hole. I don't really very few customers that I speak with like to go the speed route. It just doesn't make much sense. Yes, you're going fast, but if you hit an obstruction, it's jarring. It can throw the auger into the sidewall. It can kind of veer the auger off course. So I think finding that happy medium of your torque and kind of erase yourself for speed. I don't think in my 30 years, I don't have anybody call me that says, I want your fastest auger. Well, that might
Right.
be a PTO digger. Just put that in a backwood tractor and you can spin that thing just crazy. When it comes to hydraulics, just you want the torque so that you don't stall. Because if you stall, then you've hit your maximum torque range on your motor. And your motor's going to shut off and bypass at that point, and then you get to reverse and try again. And so I always tell customers if it doesn't stall it off, that's perfect. That means it's going to produce a hole almost about anywhere you need it to be. But of course, like I said, if you get into a solid rock, you're digging down, you hit a big boulder that's 3 foot diameter, that's going to stop you unless you have the right auger bit to go through that. But you'll need that torque more than anything.
Apart from matching the big takeaway from that to me then is kind of wherever your machine is in terms of the flow that it's providing. If you're maximizing torque, in order to maximize torque, you want to make sure that PSI rating, or that flow rate, not PSI, but that flow rate is matching toward the lower end of the range that the auger is kind of capable of.
Right.
Is there any other consideration when it comes to matching auger to machine that customers need to have?
Well, the flow rate of the vehicle equals RPM. The pressure of the vehicle calculates torque. And so if we know that your flow rate is 20 and we keep you on the lower spectrum range, then that will generate more torque. Some people like to have speed and torque, but you just can't have both. I mean, you just can't have your cake and eat it too with a hydraulic system. You got to pick one or the other. You can put that flow in the middle, best you can in the range of an auger. Like I said, 20 gallons in a 1530. I mean, that's still in the low, but it's not all the way at the bottom like the 2035. So that would be a good comfortable of someone that would say, yes, I have difficult ground. I have sometimes easy ground. But as long as you don't have that fracture bowl where you need to really peel through that layer of rock, that'll be fine. And even if you give a 1530 and you run into some of that fracturable rock and it does stall it, it's okay to hit reverse and do it again. You can do that all day long. I mean, that is designed to save the motor, eliminates, shear bolts of the old style 3-point tractor diggers, and that motor becomes your safety net. And so if you hit that once in a while, it's okay to reverse and power through, lean down more on the vehicle, push harder, and slow it down speed-wise and just try to crank the material, get that big boulder out of there. And so I think that kind of answered your question.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it really does. It's kind of like there's some calculus there to really finding that and just kind of like how important it is to optimize these flow ranges. And like the fact that you guys have these four models is not, just a coincidence or like, oh, we needed more than one. Like, no, it's to make sure that no matter what you guys have done is build a range here that no matter what machine or job that you're doing, you can kind of take some of these considerations and then find that optimal kind of mate for the machine when it comes to finding the right auger for the job. When it comes to auger bits, what do customers need to know about choosing the right bit? Is it matching to the soil conditions that we were talking about earlier? Take us through kind of like what you need to know about choosing the right bit for
Sure.
your auger.
Well, all of our augers are double flighted augers. Double flights carries more material out of the hole, equals, get the hole dug faster. Some auger manufacturers offer a single flight. Those are decent augers, but a double flight will always carry more out of the hole. Now, so we have fab, cast, rock, and tree. Those are the different categories of our auger bits. Fab is light duty, bolt-on tooth style that connects to a shank plate, a thick plate at the bottom of the auger. And then the cast is the heavy duty steel casting with the drive in teeth. The rock is the bullet style that's spin in a pocket tooth. And then you have your tree planing augers, which are basically light duty augers, fab style bolt on teeth with two different diameters. Maybe a 24 at the top, a 12 at the bottom for tree planing. So fab, cast, rock, tree, that doesn't mean much to end users. And so we basically like to ask them, when it comes to your auger, you want light duty, heavy duty. And if they're going to plant trees, they're pretty much telling you, I need to buy an auger to plant trees. And those are just out there, they're available. Those are not the primaries. And so people will say, if you don't ask them the light duty, heavy duty question, they'll ask prices. Well, how much is that bolt on 12-inch? How much is that cast 12? And there's a big difference. And so if you go to with the price, you're not doing yourself any justice there. I mean, that's like buying an F-150 to pull a 40-foot boat. You're not going to get anywhere with that. Okay, and so you have the vehicle, you have the EP 1530. Now we need to get the right auger to match to that. And so we'll just ask you a simple question: light duty, heavy duty. The majority of what I hear is heavy duty. I've got tough digging in my area. Okay, then we're going to go straight to the cast auger, match it up with the heavy torque unit, and that will be able to accommodate most of their needs. When I say most, is maybe sometimes they're across the farm or on a job site. Now it's turned into that rock that won't break up. And now you hit it with a breaker bar and it sparks. So now they're going to say, hey, this auger won't dig through. And we'll qualify them again. Hey, what are you into? Well, it sparks. Now I want to hit it with a bar. Now you need to upgrade to the rock auger. You don't need to switch over to power heads. You just need to switch over to a different bit to accommodate that. No different than putting a different type of tracks on your unit or different type of tires on your truck, depending upon what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, just like especially with this attachment, there's very few attachments where you have this amount of flexibility in terms of and a lot of it is necessity because you just don't know what's under the ground until you get going.
Right.
So, but it definitely sounds kind of like the cast is going to be the most versatile. Obviously the tree and rock are purpose built. The cast is going to be the most versatile, and then just for your light duty, or if you're just kind of you can stand to save the money to go with the fab. Sounds like.
No reason to chimp out or skimp out on an auger. I mean, you're trying to get everything accomplished, and just saving a couple $100 on a bit, that's just going to create you more headache and heartache down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to stay on a typical skid steer CTL, the EP 1530 or the 2035, and just go straight to cast auger. Unless you tell me something different that you're digging is completely easy and black dirt and that's all you're ever going to run into, then I would offer you the fab auger. But that's kind of my go-to as a cast is for your difficult, and the EP 1530 or 2035, the two powerhouses, that would accommodate 99% of CTLs and skid steers.
Great, awesome. So, which of those two tends to be the most popular, the 1530 or the bigger guy?
Well, it's probably still the 1530. When we do trade shows, we used to take a 1020 and a 1530, and the 1020 would be good for your tractor loader type people, and the 1530 would be good for your skid steer. But as we all see, these skid steers and CTLs are getting bigger, not smaller. And so if you have the flow of 22 to 25, which majority of them have, I like to go straight into the EP 2035. It is, I think, a whopping $75 more to gain that over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. So that's
Wow.
minuscule cost-wise, and a no-brainer says, I want the torque. I'm going to spend less than 100 to get there. So I think it's asking the right questions, relying on the dealer to completely go over with the customer what it is you want to do and how you want to go about it. But I foresee that the 2035 will probably become one of our number one selling units over the 1530s, probably in the next couple of years.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point in terms of just kind of the overall the increase in capability that we're seeing on a lot of these now. And honestly, what's been super interesting to me over the last few years is just kind of how it's expanding in both directions. You're getting smaller options, especially for like residential sites. Smaller skid steers and smaller CTLs are becoming, more of a thing again. But then obviously these larger machines are super popular because of all the added capability and tool carrier capability and grading and all that cool stuff. It's definitely an interesting time right now, just kind of in general in that space. When do you need to consider an auger extension, and what is the kind of consideration you need to take behind that?
Well, with the EP and the planetary size and the hoses right out to the top, anything with a 12-inch auger, you could sink the power head into the hole. And so our augers are standard 4 foot long. You can pretty much almost get a 6 foot depth with a 12-inch auger or greater. So if you need to go longer than that, there you have fixed extensions, which means it could be a 2 foot, a 4 foot, a 6 foot long extension with one hole to maximize the most length. Or we have variable extensions, which let's say you buy a 4 foot, it might have holes every 6 to 12 inches down. So if you're using an auger bit that is a 9-inch in diameter or larger, the center tube of the auger will allow that extension to go down in it. So you can actually control it. If you buy a 6 foot variable extension, you could sink it down into the auger and get another 2 foot, or you could pull it out of the auger and maximize it and get another 6 foot. So I like to hear what customers are doing, because as we manufacture our own augers, we can build custom augers. I'm not a fan on using a 4 foot auger and then two 6 foot extensions to get ultimately deep with an excavator or backhoe, because an extension doesn't carry dirt and it's kind of a weak point. When you got something that's only 2-inch hex in size, the greater risk of bending all those extensions. So if you need to do let's say a 12-foot hole, and you have a CTL that's 10-foot reach, we could build you an 8 foot long auger. Therefore, it's easy to maneuver on a trailer as well as connect to, and then you could basically just put your head into the hole and get your 12 foot. Or you could use a smaller extension. So it's kind of customer preference. We built a lot of different things. We built a 30-foot auger and sent it up into Canada. And I warned the customer, I said, be careful. It's a long auger. It is susceptible to moving in the hole. You have to be dead straight and make sure that you don't move. He said, no problem, we'll make it happen. 2 weeks later, he called me. I said, you bet it, didn't you? He goes, yeah. So we had to make a second one. And so, when you get something that long, the
Yeah.
longer you are, the more skill you're going to need to really make sure you can achieve straight depth all the way that you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. It always comes back in some way, form, or fashion to operator skill for sure. Well, Glenn, man, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to give you the final word on this. Is there anything that we haven't covered when it comes to making a purchase, an auger purchase for your skid steer CTL? Is there anything we haven't covered yet, and then that you want to add in or that customers should know? And then where can customers find more information about Danuser augers?
Yeah, we covered quite a bit how to pick the right auger for the right vehicle. I think we talked about, staying into that larger auger drive will expand your horizon. We offer stump augers as well. And to dig a hole through wood stump, you need torque. So I think we covered about everything. Now, to get a hold of us is very simple. It's danuser.com. There you'll find our phone number. You'll have our email, sales@danuser.com. And we're on all the major social networks, your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, and TikTok. And so really, we're out there, YouTube. So just make sure you ask the questions, and somebody is willing to work with you, explain the differences of, well, why is this 1530 and 2035? What are these so different? What do you need these for? Why is this fab auger cheaper than a cast auger? Which one do I need? So asking the correct questions to find someone to give you that much detail is tough. And so we like to make as many videos. We made a video of how to choose the right auger system. We went through a lot of this of flows and pressures and just make it auger system 101. And if you still just not real sure, before you spend that money, just pick up the phone or email us and we'll be glad to say, oh, wait a minute, that's not the right path you need to go. Or this is great here, but it won't work on this machine. Because sometimes customers will have a small skid steer and then a large CTL. And that is a problem because they want to run one unit on both. And we have to explain to them of what's going to happen when you run here versus what's going to happen when you run here. So we can either explain it, try to find a happy medium, or maybe we just say, look, you need to abandon one of those vehicles because otherwise you're going to have to buy one system for this and one system for that. And nobody wants to have two auger systems or more floating around. So which one do I use on this? Which one did I use here? You don't remember that. And before you know, you grab the wrong one and you're not accomplishing, you can't accomplish your job or task at that point. So ask
Yeah.
questions, get all your details, and then go see your local dealer.
That's it. 100%. I mean, you guys have been around for a very long time, lots of experience, obviously lots of thought put into the solutions that you offer. So if you're thinking about making a purchase or even kind of upgrading what you currently have, your equipment, or you're looking to expand into a different type of job, or if you're getting a new machine, make sure to, explore all of the options and avenues that you have. And that includes kind of reaching out to Danuser because, as Glenn has kind of gone through here, they are more than willing to kind of work with you on figuring out what is exactly the loadout that you need and the auger system and auger spec that you need to kind of match the machine and set you up for success in the future. Glenn, this has been awesome, man. Thank you so much for joining us here on Machine Heads. Really appreciate your time, buddy.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Glenn.